The detention facility floated in empty space, 300 kilometers from Earth's atmosphere. Admiral Ross Bennett pressed his hand against the cold window and watched his home planet turn below. He had spent 42 years defending that blue marble, and now aliens wanted him to leave it behind. The door hissed open. A creature walked in that looked like someone had stretched a mantis to human height and covered it in copper-colored plates. Its 4 eyes blinked in sequence as it approached. "Admiral Bennett, I am High Arbitrator Drell of the Canthari Concordance." The translator device around its neck turned the clicking sounds into flat, emotionless words. "We require your assistance." Ross turned from the window. "Your people put us in this cage 200 years ago, killed 3,000 humans when we tried to say hello. Now you need help." Drell's head tilted in a way that might have been embarrassment. "Your species attacked our diplomatic vessels without provocation." "We didn't attack anyone." Ross pulled up a chair and sat down heavily. His knees weren't what they used to be. "Your ships appeared in orbit. We launched shuttles full of scientists and diplomats. Your sensors read our elevated heart rates and adrenaline as hostile intent. You fired first." "Your biology is confusing." Drell remained standing. "When most species experience fear, they flee. Your people run toward danger. Your bodies prepare for violence when you are excited, scared, or even happy. We made an error. An error that killed 3,000 people and got Earth quarantined for 2 centuries. Ross folded his arms. "So what disaster is big enough to make you come here?" Drell's mandibles clicked rapidly. The translator stayed silent for a moment, then spoke again. "We are losing a war, badly." Over the next hour, Drell explained. Something called the Silence had appeared 6 months ago in the outer regions of the galaxy. Entire colonies went dark. Ships sent to investigate never returned. When the Galactic Assembly finally assembled a proper war fleet, they found something worse than any enemy they had imagined. The Silence appeared as translucent shapes that passed through shields like they weren't there. Energy weapons scattered their forms but didn't stop them. They reformed and attacked again. Conventional tactics failed completely. Every battle ended the same way: 90% casualties and full retreat. "Our greatest military minds have tried every strategy." Drell's translator carried something that might have been desperation. "We have lost 200 ships, 15 colony worlds, 3 billion lives." Ross leaned forward. "And you think humans can help?" "You are chaos incarnate, Admiral. Your species thrives on unpredictability. You have fought among yourselves for your entire history, developing tactics we find incomprehensible." Drell paused. "Perhaps that chaos is what we need." "You want us to be your attack dogs?" "I want you to save the galaxy, including Earth." Ross stood and walked back to the window. Below, city lights sparkled across the night side of the planet. Billions of people who had lived under quarantine their whole lives, cut off from the stars, blamed for a war they didn't start. "If we do this, the quarantine ends, completely." "That is not my decision alone to make." "Then make it your decision." Ross turned to face the alien. "You came here because you're desperate. I'm telling you the price. We help you win this war and humans get full access to the galaxy. No restrictions, no probation period, full membership in your assembly." Drell's plates shifted in a way Ross couldn't read. "The other species will resist." "They can resist all they want while the Silence kills them." Ross moved closer. "Or they can swallow their pride and let us help. Your choice." The alien was silent for a long moment. Then its mandibles clicked once sharply. "I will make the argument, but we must see results first. Send 1 ship. Show us that human methods work." "1 ship. If you succeed, I will have leverage to demand more. If you fail," Drell trailed off. "If we fail, you've lost nothing but 1 human ship." Ross smiled without humor. "Fine, but I choose the crew and the ship. No interference from your people." "Agreed." Ross walked to the communication panel on the wall. Then I need to talk to Captain Walsh. We've got a ship that might just be crazy enough for this job. 3 days later, the ECS Ranger detached from its dock in the orbital shipyards. It wasn't the biggest ship in Earth's defense fleet, and it certainly wasn't the prettiest. The Ranger looked like someone had welded 3 different ships together and hoped for the best, which wasn't far from the truth. Humanity had built it from salvaged parts and desperation during the early quarantine years. Commander David Price sat in the pilot's seat and watched the docking clamps release. His crew of 43 had volunteered for this mission, knowing they might never come back. Every person on board had grown up under quarantine. They had spent their lives watching the stars and knowing they couldn't reach them. "All systems green," Lieutenant Amy Flores called from tactical. "Weapons armed, engines ready." "Liaison Prell is secured in observation deck," added Warrant Officer Greg Simmons from engineering. "He looks terrified." Price smiled. Prell was a young Canthari officer assigned to watch the humans and report back. The poor alien had gone pale when he saw the Ranger's interior. Human ships apparently violated several dozen safety regulations that the Assembly considered mandatory. "Let him be scared," Price said. "Where we're going, fear is healthy." The Ranger's engines flared to life. Earth fell away behind them as they accelerated toward the jump point. Somewhere out in the dark, the silence was waiting. The Galactic Assembly had sent their best warships and watched them die. Now they were sending humans. Price wondered how many of them would make it back alive. The Assembly staging ground orbited a dying red star. Dozens of warships hung in formation, their hulls bearing scorch marks and hastily patched holes. The Ranger drifted past them like a scavenger among wounded predators. "They hate us," Amy said quietly, watching her tactical display. "Every ship out there is tracking our weapons." Price didn't blame them. 200 years of propaganda had painted humans as violent, unstable, and dangerous. The fact that Earth's quarantine existed at all proved how much the galaxy feared them. "Incoming transmission," Greg announced. "It's the Assembly flagship. Admiral Kess wants to speak with you." The view screen flickered to life. A creature that looked like a 7-foot-tall lizard covered in purple scales stared at Price with vertical pupils. Its voice came through the translator as cultured and cold. "Commander Price, I am General Kess of the Vorathi Supremacy. I command this fleet." The alien's tongue flicked out briefly. "I opposed bringing your kind here. You are a liability." "Nice to meet you too," Price said. "You will follow our protocols exactly. You will maintain formation. You will not deviate from battle plans. Is this understood?" Price glanced at Amy, who was fighting back a smile. "Crystal clear, General." "Good. You will join the cruiser Radiant Dawn on patrol in Sector 7. Try not to cause an incident." The transmission cut off. "He seems nice," Greg said. "He's scared," Amy corrected. "They all are. The silence is killing them, and now they have to work with the species they've demonized for centuries." Liaison Prell emerged from the observation deck, his copper plates clicking nervously. "Commander, I must stress the importance of following Assembly procedures. General Kess is not known for his patience with chaos," Price finished. "Don't worry, Prell will play nice." For a while. The Radiant Dawn was everything the Ranger wasn't. Sleek, polished, and built with perfect symmetry. Its weapons arrays could probably vaporize a small moon. The cruiser's captain, a crystalline being named Shale, contacted them with instructions that were more orders than suggestions. They patrolled for 6 hours in perfect formation. The Ranger stayed exactly 2 kilometers behind and 1 kilometer to port, maintaining position with computer precision. Prell visibly relaxed as the humans followed every rule. Then the silence arrived. "Contact!" Amy's voice snapped everyone to attention. "Multiple signatures bearing 037. They're not reading as solid matter." The view screen showed them. Translucent shapes that looked like someone had torn holes in reality, and the holes had learned to move. They flowed through space like oil through water, heading straight for the two ships. Radiant Dawn is hailing us, Greg reported. They're transmitting Battle Protocol Alpha 7. Price pulled it up on his screen. The protocol was simple: maintain maximum distance, rotate shield harmonics, deploy long-range bombardment, retreat if shields drop below 60%. Radiant Dawn is pulling back, Amy said, engaging with particle beams at maximum range. Price watched the crystalline cruiser execute the maneuver perfectly. Its weapons fired in calculated patterns, each shot precisely timed and aimed. The silence entities scattered under the assault, their forms breaking apart, then reforming seconds later and continuing their advance. They want us to follow the same pattern, Prell said urgently. Commander, you must maintain distance and... Greg, give me full forward thrust, Price ordered. Amy, arm kinetic cannons. What? Prell's voice climbed an octave. No, you cannot move closer. The protocol explicitly states. The protocol isn't working. Price gripped his armrests as the Ranger surged forward. Look at the Dawn. It's doing everything right, and those things aren't even slowing down. The Ranger accelerated toward the silence. Prell made a sound that the translator couldn't process. On the view screen, the translucent entities seemed to pause, as if confused by prey that charged instead of fled. Amy, I need you to watch their patterns, Price said. They're reacting to something, figure out what. Amy's fingers flew across her console. They disperse when hit, reform, advance. Wait. She pulled up bioscanner data. Boss, they're tracking the Dawn's crew. I'm seeing correlation between the ship's bioelectric signatures and the silence's movement patterns. Bioelectric. Fear response. Panic. The Dawn's crew is terrified, and these things are hunting that signature like sharks smelling blood. Price felt something click in his mind. Greg, can you fake our bio signs? What kind of fake? Make us look calm, bored even, like we're on a Sunday drive. Greg laughed. That's insane, I love it. Give me 30 seconds. Price counted down. The silence entities were close now, barely a kilometer away. He could see details in their form, geometric patterns that hurt to look at, colors that didn't exist in normal space. Done, Greg announced. We're reading as calm as a sleeping cat. The effect was immediate. The silence entities slowed. Their advance became hesitant, confused. They circled the Ranger like predators uncertain of their prey. Now Amy hit them while they're solid. The Ranger's kinetic cannons weren't elegant. They were essentially huge railguns that threw chunks of metal at relativistic speeds. No fancy energy weapons, no exotic particles, just mass and velocity. The first volley caught 3 silence entities while they were materialized and uncertain. The impacts didn't disperse them. They shattered them. Pieces spun away into space and didn't reform. Direct hits, Amy shouted. They're vulnerable when they're confused. The remaining entities scattered, fleeing from the humans who refused to be afraid. The Ranger pursued, firing calculated bursts. 4 more entities shattered. The rest vanished into whatever dimension they came from. Silence fell over the bridge. Then Greg started laughing. We just won, he said. We actually won. Prell stared at them with all 4 eyes. You violated every safety protocol. You moved toward the enemy. You used primitive kinetic weapons. You should all be dead. Price smiled. Yeah, but we're not, and the silence is. The Radiant Dawn contacted them immediately. Captain Shale's voice carried something the translator interpreted as shock. How did you do that? We stopped being predictable, Price said simply. News of the Rangers' victory spread through the assembly fleet faster than light-speed communication. Within hours, Earth received requests for 12 more ships. General Kess fought the decision, but High Arbitrator Drell overruled him. The humans had proven themselves. 2 weeks later, a small task force of 7 human vessels arrived at the staging ground. They brought something else with them: Officer Noah Grant and his company of Marines. Grant was built like a tank and had the personality of sandpaper. He had trained for boarding actions that everyone said were impossible. The assembly was about to learn that impossible was just another word for untried. General Kess called a strategy meeting aboard his flagship. The briefing room could hold 50 beings, but felt cramped with representatives from 9 different species, all trying to ignore the humans in the corner. Price attended along with Grant and Admiral Bennett, who had come with the task force as overall human commander. Haven's Gate is under siege, Kess announced, bringing up a holographic display. 3 million colonists. The silence appeared in the system 4 hours ago. We have 18 ships in position to defend. The display showed Haven's Gate, a garden world in the early stages of terraforming. The silence entities surrounded it like a swarm of ghost ships, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Our strategy is standard defensive grid alpha, Kess continued. We establish a perimeter at optimal firing range, overlapping fields of fire, mathematical precision. Each ship holds its assigned position and engages targets in sequence. Price raised his hand. That won't work. The room went silent. Kess's scales darkened to a deeper purple. Explain yourself, Commander. The silence hunts fear and predictability. If we set up a perfect grid, they'll know exactly where every ship will be. They'll exploit the gaps between firing solutions. We need to be random, chaotic. Chaos is inefficient, another alien officer said. This one looked like a floating jellyfish with too many tentacles. The Assembly has fought wars for 10,000 years using proven mathematical models. And how many of those wars were against enemies that can pass through shields and read bioelectric fear? Bennett asked quietly. No one answered. I propose we scatter the defensive grid intentionally, Price continued. Make holes in our formation, create false signatures. When the silence commits to what looks like a weak point, we collapse on them with kinetic weapons. Kess's claws scraped against the table. You want me to deliberately create weaknesses in our defensive line. I want you to set a trap. The argument lasted another hour. In the end, Kess agreed to a compromise. The assembly ships would maintain their perfect grid. The human vessels would operate independently, creating what Kess called controlled chaos and what Price called common sense. The battle for Haven's Gate started badly. The silence entities hit the defensive grid in 3 waves. The assembly ships performed flawlessly, each one firing at mathematically optimal moments, shields rotating on precise schedules. They destroyed maybe 30 entities in the first 10 minutes. The silence adapted. They started phasing through the shields at the exact microsecond between rotation cycles. 3 assembly cruisers went dark in as many minutes, their crews killed by entities that had learned to predict every move. They're reading the pattern, Amy reported from the Ranger. Every assembly ship is following the same rotation schedule. The silence has figured it out. Human vessels break formation, Bennett ordered over the fleet channel. Execute Plan Chaos. The 7 human ships scattered like startled birds. One dove toward the planet's atmosphere. Another accelerated straight up out of the orbital plane. The Ranger spun in a corkscrew pattern that made Prell physically ill. Every ship broadcast different bioelectric signatures: fear, calm, aggression, boredom. The silence entities hesitated, confused by prey that refused to follow any pattern. That hesitation cost them. Grant's transport ship, the Defiance, punched through a cluster of entities with its kinetic cannons blazing. Marines were going hunting. Grant's voice boomed over the channel. Going where? Kess demanded. Grant didn't answer. He was already climbing into his combat suit, along with 30 other Marines who had trained for a moment everyone said would never come. The Defiance matched velocity with a massive silence entity, the biggest anyone had seen. It looked like a cathedral made of shadows. Locking magnetic grapples, the Defiance's pilot announced. God help us, we're boarding. The Marines crossed empty space in armored suits, trailing safety lines behind them. Grant led the way, carrying a weapon that was essentially a portable railgun. The silence entity didn't react. It probably couldn't comprehend what was happening. Nothing in the galaxy had ever tried to board them before. Grant's boots clanged against something that felt solid but looked translucent. We're on, moving inside. The interior of the entity was impossible. Corridors that bent in directions that shouldn't exist. Gravity that changed with every step. Lights that came from nowhere. But there, in the center, something that looked almost like machinery. Geometric patterns of energy and matter woven together in complex arrays. Found their brain, Grant reported, or engine or whatever this is, setting charges. Negative, a new voice cut in. Dr. Lena Ackhaffer had insisted on joining the fleet as scientific advisor. Grant, don't destroy it. We need to understand it. Doctor, with respect, we're in the middle of a battle. Those aren't weapons, they're sensors. The silence isn't attacking, they're analyzing. They're trying to understand us. Grant looked at the pulsing patterns. They did look more like sensor arrays than weapons. Then, why are they killing people? Because we keep shooting first. They phase through our shields because they don't understand they're defensive. They're trying to get closer to study us. Our fear response makes us look like a threat, so they respond with force. Grant made a decision that would either save the galaxy or doom it. Stand down, Marines. Lower your weapons. Boss, are you crazy? Trust me. The Marines lowered their guns. Grant removed his helmet, exposing himself to whatever atmosphere existed in this impossible space. The geometric patterns pulsed brighter, faster. Then they changed color from red to blue. The silence entity stopped moving. Around Haven's gate, hundreds of other entities stopped as well. The battle simply ended. They understand, Ackhaffer whispered. They know we're not a threat anymore. Grant put his helmet back on. Control, this is Grant. I think we just made first contact, real first contact, and nobody died this time. The discovery should have changed everything. Dr. Ackhaffer spent 3 days in direct communication with the silence entities, learning their language of light and mathematics. She confirmed what Grant had suspected. They were exploratory machines from a dimension where matter and energy worked differently. Their attacks had been tragic misunderstandings. But the galaxy wasn't ready for peace. Ambassador Trell arrived at the staging ground with a fleet of his own. The Canthari politician commanded 40 warships loyal to what he called traditional assembly values. He broadcast his message on all channels so everyone would hear. The human contamination must end, Trell declared. His translator made his voice sound righteous and certain. They have infected our military doctrine with chaos. They sympathize with our enemies. They represent everything the assembly stands against: disorder, violence, and unpredictable behavior. Bennett listened to the speech from the Ranger's bridge and felt old rage burning in his chest. So we're back to being the monsters. Not everyone agrees with him, Prell said. The young Canthari had become something like a friend over the past weeks. High Arbitrator Drell is fighting for you in the assembly, but Trell has support. Many species fear change. They fear us, Price corrected. Before anyone could respond, alarms screamed across every ship. Not the silence, something worse. Jump signatures, Amy announced. Multiple contacts, they're big. 47 silence entities emerged from dark space, but these were different. Larger, more complex. Their forms pulsed with energy patterns that made even the modified sensors struggle to track them. The Forge Worlds, Prell whispered. They're heading straight for the Forge Worlds. The Forge worlds were the assembly's industrial heart, massive orbital factories that produced everything from ship components to medical supplies, billions of workers, trillions of credits in infrastructure. If the silence reached them, the economic collapse would cripple half the galaxy. General Kess took command immediately. All assembly vessels form battle wall formation Theta. We will meet them at the Forge world outer marker. General, we should coordinate with the humans, Drell's voice cut in. Their tactics have proven effective. The humans have proven they cannot be trusted, Kess shot back. We will handle this the correct way. All assembly ships follow my lead. Human vessels will remain in reserve. Bennett opened a channel to Kess. General, you're making a mistake. These entities are larger and more complex. They won't respond the same way. Your opinion is noted and dismissed, Admiral. Kess out. The channel went dead. Price watched the assembly fleet form up in their perfect battle wall. 73 ships arranged in a mathematical grid, each one positioned for optimal firing solutions and overlapping shield coverage. It was beautiful in its precision. It was also exactly what the silence would expect. They're going to die, Amy said quietly. Not if we can help them, Bennett replied. All human ships maintain position but prepare for immediate deployment. When this goes wrong, we move fast. It went wrong in the first 30 seconds. The silence entities didn't phase through shields this time. They punched through them with focused energy bursts that overloaded the emitters. 3 assembly ships exploded before they could fire a shot. The rest scattered their bombardment across all targets, following doctrine that said to distribute damage evenly. The silence concentrated their fire. They focused on one ship at a time, overwhelming its defenses, destroying it, then moving to the next. Assembly ships began dying in sequence, like dominoes falling in a line. Kess is down, someone screamed over the emergency channel. The flagship is destroyed. All ships, new defensive posture. Another assembly commander tried to take charge. Reform at coordinate Beta 7 and a silence beam cut through his ship mid-sentence. The battle wall collapsed into chaos. Assembly ships fled in random directions, abandoning formation, abandoning doctrine, abandoning each other. The silence pursued them like wolves chasing sheep. Now, Bennett ordered, all human ships engage at will, protect the retreating vessels. The 7 human ships dove into the massacre. The Ranger led the way, its kinetic cannons firing in patterns that seemed random but weren't. Price had learned from the earlier battles. The silence entities adapted to patterns, so he gave them none. Every firing solution was different. Every approach vector was unique. Captain Owen Harper commanded the frigate Tenacious, a ship barely larger than a patrol boat. He saw 3 assembly cruisers being herded into a kill zone and made a decision. Science Officer Moore, how fast can you charge the M-Pulse? Bate Moore looked up from her station with wide eyes. 30 seconds, but boss, we've never tested it at this range. It might fry our own systems. Do it anyway. The Tenacious positioned itself between the silence entities and the fleeing assembly ships. Its experimental electromagnetic pulse cannon, cobbled together from salvaged parts and human ingenuity, charged with a whine that made the hull vibrate. Firing. The pulse wave expanded like a ripple in space itself. It hit the silence entities and their geometric patterns flickered, stuttered, went dark. They tumbled through space like unpowered debris. It worked, Moore shouted. The pulse disrupted their quantum communication. They can't coordinate. All human vessels target the disrupted entities with kinetics, Bennett ordered. Hit them before they recover. The human task force concentrated fire on the stunned silence machines. Kinetic rounds tore through them, shattering their exotic matter structures. The entities that weren't destroyed fled back into dark space. The battle was over. The Forge worlds were saved. But the cost was devastating. 40 assembly ships destroyed, 30,000 lives lost, all because General Kess had refused to adapt, refused to work with the humans, refused to accept that the old ways didn't work anymore. Drell emerged from the wreckage in an escape pod. He contacted Bennett directly. "The Assembly owes you a debt we can never repay." "You can repay it," Bennett said. "Give us command authority. Let humans train your forces in adaptive tactics, and find Trell before he does something stupid." "Trell has already done something stupid," Drell replied. "He has taken his fleet and disappeared. Our intelligence suggests he is planning to attack the Silence home dimension directly. He intends to commit genocide." Bennett closed his eyes. "Then this isn't over, not even close." Dr. Akafor sat in darkness, surrounded by holographic displays that showed mathematics humans weren't supposed to understand. The Silence entities had shared their knowledge freely once they realized humans could actually comprehend unpredictability. Their dimension was collapsing, folding in on itself like paper being crumpled by an invisible hand. "They're refugees," she explained to the assembled officers. "Their entire reality is dying. They need to transfer their consciousness, their culture, everything they are, into host minds before the collapse is complete." "Why our dimension?" Drell asked. "Because we're next door, because the barriers between our spaces are thin, because they're desperate." Akafor pulled up scans of the Silence entity's internal structure. "They tried to bond with assembly species first. Kenthari, Vorathi, all of you. But your minds are too rigid. Your thought patterns are mathematical and precise. When the Silence tried to merge with you, your neural structures couldn't adapt. The hosts died." Bennett leaned forward. "But they can merge with humans. Our brains are messy, chaotic, adaptable. We have neuroplasticity they've never encountered. A human mind can hold multiple contradictory thoughts simultaneously. We can believe two opposite things and function perfectly well. That chaos is exactly what the Silence needs to survive the transfer." "So they want to possess us?" Grant asked. "No, merge, symbiosis. They would share our consciousness, not replace it. We'd gain their knowledge. They'd gain our adaptability. Both species would survive." Captain Walsh from Orbital Defense cleared his throat. "How many humans would this require?" Akafor hesitated. "Millions, maybe tens of millions. They're an entire civilization." The room exploded in argument. Some called it invasion by another name. Others saw opportunity. Bennett let them argue for 5 minutes before slamming his hand on the table. "None of this matters if Trell destroys their home dimension first," he said. "Where is he?" Navigator Tim Cross spoke up. He was young, barely 25, but had proven himself fearless during reconnaissance missions. "I can find them. The Silence showed me how to read dark matter currents. I can track Trell's fleet through dimensional space." "That's suicide," Walsh objected. "Human ships aren't designed for sustained dark matter navigation." "Mine is," Cross replied. "I've been modifying the scout ship Pathfinder for weeks. The Silence helped me adapt our engines. I can go places assembly ships can't." Bennett studied the young navigator. "What do you need?" "A crew of 5, volunteers only, and 12 hours head start before you follow." Cross smiled without humor. "I'll find Trell. You just make sure you get there in time to stop him." 8 hours later, the Pathfinder slipped into dark space. The transition felt like being turned inside out while falling through ice. Cross's crew consisted of 4 other volunteers, each one crazy enough to fly into a collapsing dimension to prevent a genocide. Dark space was wrong. There was no other word for it. Physics bent in directions that hurt to think about. Light traveled in spirals. Time moved sideways. The nav computer screamed error messages until Cross shut it off and started flying by instinct. "Contact," his sensor operator called. "I'm reading Trell's fleet, 40 ships. They're in formation around something big." Cross brought up the visual feed and felt his stomach drop. Trell had built a dimensional bomb. The device was crude but effective. Compress enough exotic matter into a small enough space, create a chain reaction, collapse the barriers between dimensions. Everything in the Silence's home reality would be crushed into nothing. "They're charging the weapon," his pilot said. 6 hours to detonation. Cross opened a channel to Trell's flagship. The Canthari's face appeared on screen, mandibles clicking with satisfaction. "Navigator Cross, come to watch justice." "This isn't justice, it's murder." The Silence killed billions of assembly citizens. By accident, they didn't understand us. We didn't understand them, but we do now. They're not invaders, they're refugees. Refugees who want to steal our bodies. Trell's eyes gleamed. "Did Dr. Ockhaffer tell you that part? They want to infest humanity like a disease. I am saving you from that fate." "She told us everything. It's not infestation, it's cooperation." Cross leaned forward. "Trell, you don't speak for the Assembly anymore. Drell has stripped your authority. Surrender the weapon." "Drell is a fool who has been corrupted by human chaos. I will restore order." Trell cut the transmission. Cross looked at his crew. "Options." "We can't fight 40 warships," his weapons officer said, "but maybe we can buy time." They spent the next 3 hours playing a dangerous game. The Pathfinder was small and fast, designed for reconnaissance. Cross used that to his advantage, appearing near Trell's ships, broadcasting false sensor readings, making it look like the main human fleet was already arriving. Trell's forces scattered to intercept threats that didn't exist. The dimensional bomb's charging sequence slowed as engineers were pulled away to battle stations. Cross pushed his ship to the limit, dancing through dark space like a leaf in a hurricane. But eventually, luck ran out. A Canthari cruiser got a solid sensor lock. Energy beams tore through the Pathfinder's shields. The ship tumbled, systems failing, hull breaching. "This is Cross," he transmitted on all frequencies. "Trell's at coordinates Delta 79er. Bomb detonates in 90 minutes. We bought you what time we could." The transmission cut out as the Pathfinder's power failed. But Cross had bought enough time. Jump signatures bloomed across dark space as the full might of Earth's military arrived. Not 7 ships this time. Not 12. The entire defense fleet, every ship that could make the journey, hundreds of vessels that humanity had been building in secret for 2 centuries. Admiral Bennett's voice rang across all channels. "Trell, this ends now. Power down the weapon or we will destroy it and every ship protecting it. You cannot fight us all human. My fleet will destroy you." Bennett smiled grimly. "We're not here to fight your fleet, Trell. We're here to save the Silence, whether you like it or not." Behind the human ships, something else emerged from the collapsing dimension. Thousands of Silence entities, the entire remaining population of their dying reality, fleeing toward normal space and the promise of survival through human cooperation. The galaxy sent warships to stop them. Few would return alive. But for the first time in this war, humanity wasn't counting the cost in lives saved or lost. They were counting it in principles worth dying for. The battle began without warning. Trell's 40 ships opened fire on the human fleet, refusing to back down even when outnumbered. His forces fought with the desperation of zealots who believed they were saving the galaxy from contamination. Price watched from the Ranger as energy beams crisscrossed space in deadly patterns. The human fleet scattered immediately, abandoning any pretense of formation. Some ships dove toward the dimensional bomb. Others engaged Trell's forces directly. A few did both simultaneously while flying maneuvers that would have made assembly tacticians physically ill. "The Silence entities are trying to evacuate through the dimensional rift," Amy reported. "But Trell's ships are targeting them. We've lost count of how many have been destroyed." "Target priority is the bomb," Bennett ordered over fleet channels. "Everything else is secondary. We stop that weapon or this was all for nothing." The dimensional bomb sat in the center of Trell's formation, a massive construct of exotic matter and stolen technology. Its countdown showed 43 minutes remaining. When it detonated, the resulting chain reaction would collapse the barriers between dimensions for light years in every direction. The silence would be wiped out. So would anyone caught in the blast radius, including the human fleet. "We need to get inside their defensive perimeter," Price said. "Amy, plot me a course that looks like we're retreating." "On it." The Ranger spun away from the battle, engines flaring as if fleeing. 3 of Trell's ships broke formation to pursue, exactly as Price had hoped. He led them on a chase through the debris field left by earlier fighting, using wrecked ships as cover. "Now, Greg, kill the engines, make us look dead." The Ranger went dark. Momentum carried it forward while the pursuing ships shot past, searching for targets that had vanished. Price counted to 10, then fired up the engines again, now behind Trell's defensive line. "Straight shot to the bomb," Amy confirmed. "We've got maybe 90 seconds before they realize what we did." The Ranger's kinetic cannons opened fire at point-blank range. The dimensional bomb's shields held, but barely. Alarms screamed as Trell's flagship changed course to intercept. "Incoming fire," Amy shouted. Energy beams tore through the Ranger's rear shields. Systems overloaded. The ship shuddered, but Price kept firing, pouring every round they had into the bomb's defensive screens. Other human ships saw what the Ranger was doing and joined the assault. Captain Harper's frigate Tenacious positioned itself between the Ranger and Trell's flagship, taking hits meant for Price. Walsh led a squadron of destroyers in a kamikaze run that drew fire from a dozen enemy vessels. The bomb's shields failed. Kinetic rounds struck its exotic matter core. Instead of exploding, it began to collapse, the unstable energies folding in on themselves. "It's working," Greg shouted. "The bomb is neutralizing." Then Trell did something no one expected. He rammed his flagship into the dimensional device, using his own ship's reactor to force the detonation manually. "All ships emergency jump," Bennett screamed. "Get out of dark space now." But it was too late. The bomb detonated. Reality shattered. The dimensional barriers between spaces tore open. A wave of impossible energy expanded outward at speeds that made light look slow. Ships tried to flee, but the wave caught them, crushed them, scattered their atoms across dimensions that should never touch. The Ranger's hull screamed as exotic radiation tore through it. Price felt the ship coming apart around him. He saw Amy's console explode, heard Greg shouting something that got cut off, felt the deck drop away beneath his feet. Then something strange happened. The Silence entities, thousands of them fleeing through the rift, changed course. They moved toward the human ships, not away. They phased through hulls and merged with crews, not to attack but to protect. Their exotic matter bodies absorbed the dimensional radiation, shielding human biology from energies that should have killed everyone instantly. Price felt something enter his mind. It didn't hurt. It felt like gaining a new sense he never knew he was missing. Suddenly, he could see in directions that didn't exist, could think in patterns that bent through multiple realities simultaneously, could understand mathematics that human brains weren't designed to process. But he was still Price, still human, just more. The explosion faded, dark space stabilized. The surviving ships drifted in the aftermath, damaged but intact. Price looked at his crew and saw them looking back with eyes that held new light. The Silence entities hadn't possessed them. They had bonded with them, creating something that was both human and Silence, neither and both. "Status report," Price said, his voice carrying harmonics it never had before. Around the fleet, other captains reported in. Of the 300 human ships that had entered dark space, only 73 survived. The Tenacious was gone. Walsh's destroyer was gone. Hundreds of others were gone. But the dimensional bomb was neutralized. Trell was dead. and the silence had found refuge in the minds of those who had fought to save them. 6 months later, Admiral Bennett stood in front of the Galactic Assembly and made his report. The humans who had bonded with silence entities stood behind him. They looked human still, but moved with a grace that suggested they existed slightly out of phase with normal reality. "The quarantine is ended," Drell announced officially. "Humanity has earned full membership in the Assembly. Your sacrifices will be remembered." Bennett looked out at the assembled species. Some showed gratitude, others showed fear. A few showed outright hostility. The galaxy had sent warships to destroy the silence. Only a few returned alive, but those few had changed everything. "We didn't do this for membership," Bennett said quietly. "We did it because it was right. The silence were refugees, not invaders. They needed help, not destruction. That's the difference between humans and the rest of the galaxy. You see threats. We see possibilities." Later, Price visited the memorial station built in deep space, a crystalline structure that listed the names of every human who had died in the war. 3,000 names from first contact, 700 from the battles against the silence, thousands more who had sacrificed themselves in the final confrontation. He touched the wall where Commander Tim Cross's name was carved. The young navigator had bought them the time they needed. His Pathfinder had been found drifting, crew dead, but their mission accomplished. "The galaxy sent warships," Price said to the empty station. "Few returned alive, but we sent warships knowing most wouldn't return. That's what makes us human. We don't count the cost when lives need saving." Behind him, Amy and Greg stood silently. They carried silence entities in their minds now, sharing consciousness with beings from a dying dimension. They were the future of both species, proof that cooperation could transcend biology, culture, and even reality itself. The stars turned overhead. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was learning to accept that humanity wasn't the threat they had feared for 2 centuries. Humans were chaos, yes. Unpredictable, yes. Dangerous when threatened, absolutely. But they were also compassionate, adaptable, and willing to die for strangers who needed help. That was the lesson the galaxy was still learning, and Price hoped they learned it before the next crisis came, because humans would answer that call too, no matter the cost.